Hiya! Thank you for joining me today. Today we've got a really short but incredibly broad question that was asked by Edward. And that question is, what is the most common misconception of CD/TG people? And I had to put a bit of thought into this because, immediately I came up with 5 or 6 different things that I could talk about, but which one is the most common? And it's quite a difficult question to answer because I think there is a absolute plethora of misconceptions about CD people and TG people, for example. But really I found my answer in the question. So, we can notch off a couple of things. This idea that gender and sexuality are somehow linked. For me, the sooner we all get clear that gender and sexuality are two completely different things, and being transgender does not make you gay, it does not make you straight, it does not make you bi, it doesn't make you anything at all in terms of your sexuality. Gender and sexuality are completely separate things. They have nothing in common. It's one of the reasons why LGBT, some people think it shouldn't be LGBT, because the T relates to gender and the LGB relates to sexuality. So unfortunately the term LGBT lumps together 3 types of sexuality with 1 type of gender discussion and puts them all together. And then you get the old LGBTQ blah 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 plus type stuff, where we add on all sorts of different things, and there are all these different ways of talking about how someone is, whether they're bisexual, whether they're pansexual, whether they're asexual, what kind of person people are. And I think this is a big confusion point for a lot of people, but for me it's one of those misconceptions. I don't think it's necessarily the most common misconception, but it's certainly one that bears some discussion, perhaps something we'll talk about in the future. Another misconception is that it's a sexual thing to dress up. That for some people it's true that there are kicks to be gained by cross-dressing, and some people do it for sexual reasons, but not for everyone. I think that's a common misconception. People think that it's to do with let's say masturbatory fantasies, that kind of activity, and I'm sure for some people it is, and it has to have something like that for some people. Of course it does. Yeah, it's ridiculous to think otherwise. But for many people it doesn't. It's got nothing to do with that whatsoever. And I think what we're circling around for me here is probably the biggest misconception at all. And the root of it is in the question, which is, what is the most common misconception of CD/TG people? There we have 2 different things. Cross-dresser, CD, TG, transgender. Now, I came up with my own sort of definition of what cross-dresser was, what transvestite was, what transgender was, when I needed to explain it to someone. So I wanted to explain to someone, so I explained it as follows. I wanted to explain to them what I thought the differences were. Someone asked me, are you a transvestite? My answer to that is yes. A transvestite wears clothes of the opposite gender. Now, the problem with that is that you have to start with 2 binary genders, okay, in order to be a transvestite. So you start getting into a wider conversation about, are there 2 binary genders? I don't believe there are. I think there's a spectrum. Gender is a spectrum, and I think people find themselves somewhere on that spectrum, and the idea of 2 poles, where you are either male or female, I think is outdated as a concept. I think it's based purely on what people think of as physical characteristics. I don't think it takes into account the actions of the brain, and I think it locks people into particular stereotypical ways of behaving and ways of dealing with other people and with children, for example, that isn't, I don't think it's a positive thing for society. So, transvestite, meaning I dress in the clothes of the opposite gender, is a term that could be applied to me because I clearly dress either malely or femalely. I dress as one of those two poles, which to me would make me a transvestite. Other people may dress in a neutral way and may view themselves as being neither male nor female. And therefore, there is a sense in which what I think of as the biggest misconception of CD/TG is that this one weird, large, complex, frustrating community can be represented by a person. I do not represent the trans community. I can't. I'm a man who dresses as a woman. I don't have gender dysphoria. I don't identify as being female 100% of the time. I don't identify as being asexual. I don't identify as being agender. I don't identify as being neither female nor male. I sometimes identify as being male, I sometimes identify as being female, and when I do that, I present in that way, in a binary way. I can't represent the trans community. And this idea that that this incredibly diverse, wide community can be summarized by any one label is for me a problem. And I think that's the most common misconception, is that if you meet someone in the trans community, that you've somehow met a representative of the entire community. And I've mentioned this in previous videos. We range from fetish behaviour, dress up in your wife's knickers, with your hairy legs. I don't find the image particularly, enticing. That level of cross-dressing. Good luck to you. Okay? Enjoy your life. Have fun with your life. I do not look down on you. It doesn't appeal to me, but I don't look down on you. You enjoy the thing that you enjoy. But we range from, within this community, from people who do very, let's say, simple, at-home actions that maybe are more for sexual kicks. And we range all the way to people who live 100% of their life in the opposite gender, to people who live with what they would prefer to be no visible depiction of gender. And they don't choose to, let's say, change themselves physically, but they might choose to present themselves as being 100% completely different. It's not to do with what operations you've had. It's not to do with how you how much money you have, how much you can spend on things. It's to do with being a very, very massive, wide community that cannot be represented by an individual, cannot be represented by one subset. And this, I think, is the most common misconception, is that there is such a thing as a united trans community. There isn't one. We're all individuals. The more we spend time talking about this, the more we realise, the more we're allowed to talk about this in public, the more and more we are realising that we all have different divergent, beliefs, different things we want to get out of this. And the more we fracture, potentially, into smaller and smaller subgroups, and then you can start to specifically identify with the people within your subgroup. And I think that's really the main misconception for me, as I said, is that this is one big community and we all should think the same way and we should all be fighting for the same things. We should all be pushing in the same direction. I cannot identify with some other people in that wider trans community because I don't get their lives. I don't feel the way they feel. I can empathize with them. I can absolutely get right behind their right to live their life as they want to. So to my viewpoint, if you're not harming anyone, you should have the right to live your life as you are. And harm does not include the emotional harm of having to bump into a crossdresser. That is not harm, okay? Harm is physical, hurting, emotional torment on people, or on the animal kingdom. I feel quite strongly about that as well. As long as you're not perpetuating or promoting that kind of harm within any community, I think you should be free to conduct yourself as you want to, and I will get right behind your ability to conduct yourself in that way. If you want to, like I said, if you want to put on a pair of women's underwear and take some photos and put them up online, good for you. Fill your boots, enjoy yourself, have fun. If you want to live your life, if you were born and raised male, you want to live your life as female, good for you. Enjoy your life. Be happy. Try to be happy. Don't hurt other people. Try to be happy. Beyond that, there's nothing else to say about the subject. And I think that's really this sort of most common misconception. And it took me a while to learn this, because I would, I want people to like me. And I know that there are people I've met who I've chatted to, we got on quite well, but they don't want me in their circle of friends. Potentially because I live two different lives. And I understand that. It took a while for me to understand that, but I now get it. There are people in the trans community who it's not they view me as being lesser to them, necessarily. There are people like that. But they are trying to live their life in a particular way. Let's say they live one life. They go out into the world and they present themselves as who they are. They have one Facebook page. They have one representation of themselves to the world, and they want their friends to be in that same sort of camp. They want to be open with everyone. I am not open about a large portion of my life. I have two separate lives. I keep them separate. I choose to do that. And for someone who lives their life on one plane, who lives their life in one way, openly to the world, my lifestyle, my approach doesn't sit well. I wouldn't let them be friends with both sides of my personality because I'm not open about it. So if I am friends with them, they can only ever be friends with Juliette or not Juliette. And I get that. I get that to some people in my community, I'm not living a life they can identify with. I can't take it against them. I can't hold it against them at all. It's people have the right to associate with who they want to associate with. And now I get that. I get that much better than I used to. I wanted everyone to like me. I wanted everyone to want to be friends with me. And that's just never going to be the case. It doesn't, life doesn't work that way. Anyway, really, really challenging question. That for me is the most common misconception, is that there's such a thing as CD people or TG people, or that CD people and TG people are part of one big community. I don't think that's the case. I think we're much more fractured than that. I like that we work together, or I think we should work together to support each subgroup's right to express themselves as they want to. I think that's important. But the idea that someone can somehow speak for all of us, the idea that, and again, unfortunately these are celebrities, but the idea that, let's say, Ellen Page speaks for bisexuals, or the idea that Sir Ian McKellen speaks for homosexuals, or the idea that Caitlyn Jenner speaks for transsexuals, it's not right. That's not how the world works. And no individual, certainly the trans community is so broad, so diverse, that there is no individual that can possibly speak for everyone. Some of us have been through various different parts of that trans spectrum. Some of us are on a journey through different bits. You know, you might start by trying on a pair of knickers and then you gravitate to doing something else. I did. So I started, you know, I wasn't brave enough to shave my legs. So I'd wear underwear and I wouldn't, you know, but I bought a skirt and a top and whatever else and bits and pieces and you add to it. And now I found myself where I am and I'm quite happy where I am and that's great. Some people stay in that particular area for whatever reason and good luck to them. I think that's the main thing. So that would be for me the most common misconception. This is really rambling. I know this has been a pretty rambling video. Very much aware of that. But it's one of those subjects that it's hard to, you can either give a very, very short answer, or if you're me, you can give a very long, rambling, incoherent answer. And unfortunately, that's one you've got today. So sorry about that, but it is what it is, and you're just gonna have to live with it. If you got this far. If you didn't get this far, then you escaped a lot earlier. So anyway, thank you for joining me today. A very, very interesting question, Edward. Thank you very much for sending that in. I appreciate you taking the time. Very difficult one to answer. I could have talked about lots of different subjects in this one, but like I said, I think this is where I feel there's most confusion today for most people. And I think that's something that the more we talk about these things, the more we can alleviate some of that confusion as we go forward. Anyway, thank you again for the question. If there's any comments, please let me know down below. Anyone who particularly thinks there are other misconceptions about TG, CD people, etc., then by all means let me know. And look forward to hearing from you. And yeah, look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks so much, and bye. Bye.